Today I stand before you a son, a brother, an uncle, a cousin, a friend, and maybe even an enemy. I stand before you an author, a philanthropist, and a mentor. But I can't leave out the fact that I'm flawed, imperfect, and scarred. But also today I still stand. And the only reason that I am still standing is because I had the audacity to keep going. The word audacity is defined as a willingness to take bold risks, to be daring, fearless, brave, and confident. To keep going means to make an effort to live normally when in a difficult situation. So when you look at the statement, have the audacity to keep going, it simply means to be willing to live normally in a difficult situation by taking bold risks with bravery while being confident. Now, to be honest, I haven't always housed the audacity to keep going. In fact, there have been many roads that I have traveled to get to where I am today. I am acquainted with standing at the crossroad of failure and lack. I've made a few pit stops along the way to becoming who and what I am today. I have been married to depression, slept with fear, dated desperation, while avoiding the potholes of accountability, and I have not always yielded to the sign of communication. I've changed lanes into other people's business with no signal light to advise them that I was moving over. You see, a lot of times we shine the light on the good in our lives, neglecting the fact that we can't take the good without the bad, because then we find ourselves off balance. With me, what you see is what you get. And I'm open to share the good, the bad, the ugly, and the uncomfortable. I have not always hit the mark. As a matter of fact, I've failed more times than I've succeeded. But one day, I had to look in the mirror that my own life presented to me day after day and realize that I had two options. I could lay down and die, or I could get up and live. I chose life. I chose to keep going. There were many times in life that I stopped in fear because I had already played out scenarios in my mind and convinced myself that this situation would go sour. And sadly, there were times where situations and scenarios played out in real time exactly the way they played out in my mind. But what happens when you're faced with a real life situation that doesn't go the way you want it? Do you give up? Life can be scary, and it can also be funny. It has a funny way of showing up. And most times when life does show up, it doesn't look anything like it did in our imaginations. It can be gruesome and it can be painful. I remember when I was younger, my little brother and I, when we would fall and hurt ourselves, every time we fell and hurt ourselves, my mom did this thing. Once we fell and hurt ourselves and it looks like we were about to cry, she would smile, and in the weirdest voice, she would do something with her body and she would tell us, shake it off, shake it off. And before long, we found ourselves shaking it off, mimicking what mom was doing. And before long, we didn't even realize that it hurt as bad as it did before. And that taught me a life lesson that I didn't even realize until my adult years. There are going to be times that I'm going to fall. And there are going to be things and people that will hurt me intentionally and some without any intent. But it's not how bad it hurts, but rather how I respond to the pain that determines the outcome of my situation. There are many times that I felt like a failure as a dad because I couldn't give my sons what we call the American dream of a family. But one day I had to realize that when we go to sleep at night, none of us have the same dream. My parents weren't married, and I didn't live in the house with my dad. And now here my sons are separated from me day after day. I may not have been in the house with them, but I'm still present in their lives to this day. So what I'm doing is I'm breaking one generational curse at a time. I'm changing the narrative. I'm shaking it off. At one point in life, I lost everything. Divorced, homeless, lost my job, only seeing my children when I was allowed. Dogged through the process, and I'm talking about in and outside of the church. Sat down from a position in my church that I was most passionate about. And I almost lost my faith in God. Because why would you allow me to go through all of this and not show up for me? I felt like at times the line to God was disconnected or something because I didn't hear anything. But when I did hear from God, this is what I heard. It was good that I was afflicted. Now me, being honest, I'm like, okay, God, I'm down here. I'm going through some real life, lifetime situations. And that's all you got. I was being lied on and lied to, but it was good. I knew, even through the circumstances, that when I was down to nothing, that meant that God was up to something. It didn't feel good, but I soon understood that I had to keep showing up because just like my mom, there were two little people that were depending on me to keep showing up. Despite the pain and all that I had been faced with, they needed me. And if I'm being totally honest, if it had not been for them, I would have stopped showing up a long time ago. I showed up in pain and still played my part. I showed up with tears in my eyes and still served. I showed up tired. I showed up limping. And sometimes when I didn't have enough strength, I showed up crawling. But I still had the audacity to keep showing up because I knew the current circumstances were not worthy to be compared to the glory that would be revealed later. It was necessary. It had to happen, but it couldn't kill me. It didn't feel good all the time, but I had to go through the pressure because I wouldn't be able to become a diamond without the pressure. I learned that if I don't go through anything, how will I ever reach back and strengthen someone else? If you're going through, keep going. Why would you stop in the middle of a mess when the end result gives you your message? A year or so ago, I recorded a documentary for my book titled It Had to Happen, But It Couldn't Kill Me, and I invited a few family and friends. I can't forget my mom telling a story of how she had to keep going and how she used public transportation, and at that time, it was just she and I, and sometimes she stood downtown Charlotte with 2 coats on, going to work and getting me to daycare because she realized that I depended on her for everything. She could have given up. She could have walked away. She could have dropped me off at the nearest adoption agency. Makes sense, right? 17 years old and just beginning to live, and now you're tied down to this little person who is depending on you for food, clothing, shelter, love, and direction. But she had the audacity to keep going. And because she had the audacity to keep going in front of me, I now have the audacity not to stop. I've only shared this with a few people, but I feel like someone needs to hear it. When I was younger, and before my little brother came along, my mom was in a relationship with his dad that at some point became toxic and physical. And mom didn't get it right the first time, but eventually she did get it right and she got us out. So while we're talking about the audacity to keep going, there's someone that I need to encourage that you need to have the audacity to stop showing up. If you're in any toxic situation, relationship or otherwise, make sure that you're doing what's right for you. And if you have to, stop showing up. My mom is the strongest woman that I know. And because in her life, she made hard decisions. Watching her, it makes it easier for me to make decisions for my life. Have the audacity to keep showing up. I just want to share with you, at 13 years old, while getting ready for a family reunion, I was in the bathroom of my parents' home, and the enemy started talking to my mind, telling me that your mom doesn't love you, your dad's in prison, incarcerated for 300 years. Nobody will even miss you. And I wasn't careful. I believed him. So I decided to take the contents of 2 pill bottles, because what am I here for? What is my purpose in life? I took those pills and I was questioning myself and saying, why didn't mom just abort me? In that situation, my cousin called me and she ended up praying for me while I was on the phone. And needless to say, I'm still here today because the enemy had a plan, but God had purpose for my life. One thing that the enemy does is he'll add a word, one word. He only needs to add one word to anything that God has already spoken over your life. God said, you shall surely die. The enemy tricked us and said, well, if you eat of the fruit, you shall surely not die. So we have to be careful when we're allowing the enemy to speak to our minds, because it only takes one word to change the very dynamics of your life. And I don't know who this is for, but I feel it, so I'm going to go ahead and say it. Make peace with your past. Because if you don't, when you have peace, you'll never have to show up in pieces. Your past was meant as a place of reference, but not a place of residency. Don't get stuck living in your past, because when you do, the future designed and promised to you will pass you by. Stop doing like I did in my earlier years, getting stuck on stupid. It's time to outgrow our past. It's not supposed to fit us anymore. And if it does, that literally means that you have not grown. It's time for us to grow up and take the pacifiers out of our mouths. Do we know how foolish we look at 40 years old, walking around still with a pacifier, wanting to be soothed and comforted? Why would we even still be sucking on a bottle with milk when there's a plate of steak sitting right beside you? I'm thinking about the man that laid at the pool for 38 years and never got in. There were people that were coming and they were going and getting in the pool and they were receiving their healing and receiving what they needed. And this man was laying there because he had no help. Today, a lot of us are laying by the wayside of life, knowing we need to tap in to get what we need, but we're still laying there. I encourage you today to stop laying there. Get up and get what you need. How many days, weeks, months, and years are you going to sit in the same place, wasting away in the presence of beautiful and not tap in? It's your time. Stop waiting for someone else. If you want it, go get it. Get the house. Get the job. The car. Tap in, because what's on the inside of you is all you need to keep going. Stop asking for permission and start serving notice. I know sometimes life knocks you down, but in the book of Revelations, God told the church, I know your deeds. See, I have placed an open door that no one can shut. And I know that you only have a little strength, but you've kept my words and not denied my name. If you've kept God's words and not denied his name, every door that you walk up to is yours. You don't have to praise him in the hallway, because every door, access granted, And if you follow God, he is not going to lead you to a door that will not open. So if you're like the man by the pool, like I was, I encourage you today, take up your bed and walk. Have the audacity to keep showing up. It's time to take back everything that belongs to you. Your children, your peace, your joy, your life. The other day I was watching, and Pastor Henderson reminded me while watching one of the videos that we're born looking like our parents, but we die looking like our decisions. That made me remember a statement that my home pastor reminded me of at a funeral, where he said that when you look at your headstone, there are two dates: the date you were born and the date that you die. What we do in our life is the dash. So make sure that everything you do in the dash is worthwhile. And those dates are out of our control. But life is about what we do in the dash. Today, I encourage you to make the right decisions while you're living in the dash. And remember to always have the audacity to keep going.